E-commerce is an essential retail channel, but the costs associated with selling online have become daunting. From soaring warehousing and last-mile delivery costs to high volumes of returns, it can get to the point where the more you sell, the more money you lose. One cost that has gotten out of control is customer acquisition cost, or CAC, C-A-C. Those pay-per-click ads that drive traffic also take a bite out of your margins. In fact, they can devour so much of your profits that many sellers are left with mere crumbs. Today, Liam Patterson, co-founder of Bidnamic, a marketing technology platform that helps retailers unlock the full potential of Google Shopping, is joining us here on A Seat at the Table. Bidnamic uses AI to help retailers optimize their ad spend on Google Shopping, which happens to be the leading pay-per-click advertising platform. In this episode, Liam will be discussing how the best players are competing and winning using Google Shopping, how AI can help retailers attract better traffic rather than just more traffic, which in and of itself is critical, and how to develop a strategy to make better ad spend decisions. As we all know, whether it's digital marketing or any other area of our business, having top-performing talent is critical in order to get the best possible results. However, finding those people is getting increasingly difficult. It's why so many leading companies turn to AsiaNet consultants to help them identify and recruit the talent they need. I've seen how they've helped international companies fill even the most difficult to fill positions. So it's definitely worth checking out their website at asianetconsultants.com. I'll leave a link in the show notes. Now let's hear what Liam has to say about how we can start to reclaim some of those profits from our e-commerce stores. Liam, I am really delighted to have you on A Seat at the Table. E-commerce is a huge topic, and certainly AI has become an explosive topic. So I'm really interested to dive in and get your perspective. You've done so many interesting things around both e-commerce and AI. Perhaps you can start by just tackling what you see as the role that AI now will potentially be playing realistically, in the nearish future, okay, not 10 years from now, but in the nearest future around e-commerce and what you're referring to as Google Shopping.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the role of AI and machine learning, in my opinion, is it's going to be all about elevating humans and taking away the repetitive, the boring, the mundane, and actually maybe tasks that humans aren't really great at, which are kind of just mathematical calculations, and instead it's going to elevate us to take the more creative, more innovative, more interesting approaches, so that it's going to elevate people from being on the front line doing repetitive tasks to be able to think more strategically and think about how different pieces of data and different pieces of information and different types of products can really reach their customers most effectively. So I'm really excited about the role that AI is going to play, and I'm certainly not a doomsday seller saying that it's going to be all about robots and machinery that's going to take away human roles and people capital out of the equation. Absolutely, I don't think that's going to happen at all. I think that we're all way too busy, way too stressed, doing lots of parts of our jobs which are just not that interesting and not that enjoyable. And I think that AI has a role to play to compromise, to kind of complement that and take some of those pieces away from our day to day and elevate us as humans in our role as digital marketers. In terms of specifically how it will play a role in Google Shopping, I think there's so many different areas. So Google Shopping is pretty much the number one channel for retailers, for e-commerce retailers to reach customers. So it's a huge channel. I'm sure we've probably all ended up using it a few times when we've gone to Google looking for a product, typed in a product we're looking for, and we've seen a carousel appear. So it's normally 5 or 6 tiles. So that's Google Shopping. And then It's a cost per click model. So as soon as you click onto one of those ads, you're taken through to the retailer's website, to the product page, and that retailer is paying for that click. So actually paying Google every single time you, as a shopper, click on one of those ads. So it's a cost per click or pay per click model. And that's when the complexities start to build. And we come in working with retailers that are scaling up. They've either got aggressive growth goals, maybe they've been VC funded, or maybe they're looking around their profitability. So that's when we typically would get involved in that journey. And the challenge we're trying to solve is the question of how much should I pay for that click? And that's the big question that's multifaceted and that we utilize AI and machine learning to try and solve as well.
So how do you determine that?
Yeah, a great question. So there's a few areas. So what really makes our technology unique at Bidnamic is that we look at and believe wholeheartedly in an SKU level of granularity. So effectively, as if you imagine your retailer, you've got loads and loads of products. Typical retailers have about 8,000 product SKUs. So a huge amount of items in whatever category they're selling. Maybe use the example of footwear. So they've got sneakers, and they're selling those items. But every single product is unique in terms of its margin. It's who's going to be buying that, how they're going to use it, how often they're going to come back and repeat purchase, and maybe even their journey of what they're looking for after they click. So we really look at that and X-ray every single SKU, and we are able to bring in data about the product, the brand, the size, the color, and effectively we're able to connect it and see a universe of products are all connected to each other. And that's how we're able to understand the similarity and difference between product SKUs. And how we use that is we connect it to when somebody is searching. So when someone types in and into Google, they're typing in their keywords, their search terms, and maybe they're referencing men's sneakers. Very, very generic. We call this an awareness term. So it could apply to all the products that retailer sells. So which is the best fit product for that, and how much do we want to pay? How much we want to pay is a very small amount. And with Google Shopping, the more you pay, the more your product ad moves along to the left-hand side, to the front position of that carousel. So a lot of consumers think that Google Shopping is like Amazon, which has a buy box, which once you which Amazon selects based on price, so it's always the cheapest. And a lot of people think, oh, that'll be how Google will do it when they're asked, or it's the most trustworthy, or it's the fastest delivery. Because they would imagine that Google would do that heavy lifting for them. But actually, with Google Shopping ads, it's just who is willing to pay Google the most for that click. So it is an auction. So if me and you had the same products and you were willing to pay a cent more than me, your product would appear in front of mine. And around 60 to 65% of all shoppers click on the first position on the carousel because they believe it's the cheapest and most effective for them. So that means there's a real price competition in terms of us bidding against each other for that top impression and those positions on the ads carousel that move from left to right, being the most expensive at the left. So what we do when we're bidding is we're understanding the words customers are typing in when they're shopping, and we're predicting what we call purchase intent. So how likely are they to actually click and buy from that search term? So if someone's typed in men's sneakers, very generic, could be any type of sneakers, it could be any brand, any size, any color. So it's unlikely we're going to match that. So, and then as the search term gets more detailed, that's when we really kick in with our AI to understand the words, match those to the products, to understand how much to pay for that click.
That's so interesting. I never realized that, actually. I mean, I know that on Amazon that they do try to show you I suppose what they feel is the best possible match. Whether it's the cheapest or not, I couldn't say, but I'm going to start paying attention to that now that you brought it up. But I never realized that when you type that search term into Google, that the first one they show you is the most expensive because it's bidding, and as you've explained how that works. Really interesting. I mean,
yeah, it's not, as I say, it's not always the most expensive, but it's certainly not always the cheapest. So
right.
yeah, it's not already been filtered for price, so it's not always the lowest cost. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, how can you predict? I mean, I suppose if someone is searching, like you said, for a very, very specific description, they are looking for that specific item. But how do you parse that with intention to buy? Because so often people look at things, they think about it, whether they actually buy it on that website or whether they'll then go and try to look at it in a store or something. I mean, how do you figure that out on your side?
Yeah, so the real core of it is, first of all, understanding the product. So X-raying and understanding all the attributes like the brand, the size, the color, the model number of that product. And then it's effectively matching that to search terms and search queries that customers are making. So as they become more explicit in what they're typing in, what they're searching for, we're going to be moving to bid more. So if you imagine someone's typed the men's sneaker, quite generic, we don't want to pay too much. So maybe we're right at the back of the carousel, or maybe not even showing up at certain times. And then if they add, say, Adidas or Nike men's sneaker, it's okay, they've zoned in on the brand. So now the propensity to buy, the conversion rate and the revenue per click, which is how much is what's happening after they click on the ad after we pay Google that money on behalf of our retailers we work with, that's what actually happens. They buy and how much they spend. So we're able to see that full chain down to the checkout, down to how much they're placing of the order value, and even down to the profit. How much profit is that transaction making for the retailer? So we can take that information and we can map it against the search terms. And as the search terms become more detailed, more long tail, and they start to move down to awareness of the most generic ones, then consideration, they're starting to reference brands, sizes, and then we get to purchase terms. And purchase terms could be you've been on another retailer's website, you've seen the product title, copy pasted it. Maybe you want to see, is this price competitive or not? Maybe it's around the delivery time. Maybe it's out of stock on that other retailer's website. So you've typed that full, really long description, typed it into Google, searching for that exact product, very likely to buy. Maybe unfortunately, maybe you're in a physical store and looking for a better price or checking the price is competitive. So there's loads of reasons why we get these really long tail, really detailed descriptions. And those are when the customer is really ready to buy. So we call those purchase terms, and we align the budget. So the amount we're paying per click to those search terms against an individual product SKU. So what that means is that when someone is typing that huge term into Google, we'll be right at the front of the carousel, maybe paying $2, $3, $5, even $10, $20 for that click based on it being profitable. Equally, as the search terms become shorter, more generic, we're driving less revenue and less orders and transactions, we're going to reduce that bidding down and get less visibility. So we're effectively using the customer's budget to be its most effective.
That's so interesting. Now, do you have any ideas around what percent conversion you get, or if you're a retailer, you're having to factor in the guys that convert and of course what you paid for that click, but then all of those people who clicked but didn't actually make a purchase, right? Because all of that is, I suppose, your ad spend on Google Shopping. Is there any sense of what it typically costs, or how do people figure that out?
Yeah, so we do have some benchmarks on the website which look at different categories and different verticals. So if a listener is in fashion, or if they're in health and beauty or home and garden, they are quite different. But as a rule of thumb, a conversion rate for e-commerce is around 2 to 3%. So it's in that kind of benchmark, which, that sounds good. People can build and do build very, very profitable businesses. But even let's say it's at that top end, it's at 3%. That still means 97% of clicks and ad spend that correlates to that is being wasted.
Right.
Which, when you step back and think of that, wow, every day 97 out of 100 clicks are not leading to sales. And that's about making sure that we're buying the right traffic. We're maybe getting less of that, not only spending less, but sending less traffic for people who've just put in men's sneakers, and instead trying to get more visibility, more clicks coming through on these more detailed, longer tail, more in-market terms, so that we can start to move that conversion rate, which is when someone clicks on the ad and purchases for the retailer.
It's true, because people think that a 3% conversion is horrible, but actually, even in old school direct marketing, right, where people were doing direct mail back in the day, when they were sending it to a pretty well thought out list, oftentimes a retailer would send it to their customer base. Even then, a conversion rate of 1% was considered to be outstanding. Typically, conversion rates can be on things to be less than even that. So it's funny, because most people who don't do this on a day-to-day basis are looking for much higher conversion rates. It's difficult to explain to people what the expectations should be.
Yeah, it is really difficult, actually. And so you've got one part is like the conversion rate. The other is the return on ad spend. So this is what, for $1 you put in, how many dollars you need to get back. And everybody well, not everybody, but a lot of people we speak to, particularly in the kind of earlier stage of scaling up their business, always thinks, well, the higher the return on ad spend, so the more dollars I get back for my dollar in, the more, that's what I want, which makes sense, right? We'd all rather, if we were asked, would we rather have what if we put $1 in? Would we rather have $5 back or $10? The answer is going to be $10. But actually, when we start to think about volume, that you might have a $10 return or 10 times return on ad spend, we might only be spending $1,000. So you're only making $10,000. Whereas actually, if you could spend $10,000 and get 5 times back, you get 50,000. So the real question comes, well, which one's better? And that comes down to your profitability. So what is the margin of the products you're selling? And this is, again, it's something which we're unlocking through machine learning, through being able to be really granular how we understand and connect this journey of products. So we know what the margin is on the products. We know how the search terms perform against those, so how the clicks perform against them on certain words, and we can map that to the profit that's being generated. So then we can start to speak to retailers and say, okay, actually, would you be happy making 10% per sale, 20% per sale, 30% per sale? And suddenly it's in a language that makes sense to them, that they can go, actually, yeah, I'm happy after my costs, which are not only my ad spend, but actually their payment processing, maybe return rates, other costs that they need to factor in, warehousing, shipping, that they can start to see holistically how much profit they're making, and then they can start to set their targets much more cleverly than just saying, I want to increase how much I get for every dollar I spend.
Very, very true. I mean, customer acquisition, right? CAC online is massive, and people find that, I mean, as I'm sure you know, that they basically lose a lot of their margin on that. Even though they're generating a lot of sales, they're finding that doesn't leave them with much profit.
Yeah, I think there's so many areas to get tripped up by. So you could just, look at, say, Christmas time or the festive periods, and you could go, wow, we've made so much revenue, made so much, keep spending. And then you come January and you start to get all these returns coming back in, particularly in areas like fashion where, people have gifted products, actually, maybe people who received the gift, it wasn't quite right for them. And suddenly January comes and they've got less revenue because they've had this big seasonal uplift. And then they're getting piles of returns and money going out the door that they already kind of assumed that they were going to keep and have made a profit on. So again, it's really important to monitor these metrics of not only what's coming through at the top of the funnel. So how many clicks am I getting? What sales am I getting? What revenue am I getting? But also start to think about profitability and that cycle of a business. And in the on the other side, we've seen it on maybe a more positive note. We've seen it with the customer's lifetime value. So customers where retailers are able to acquire a customer who's really into the sport they sell. So we work with a large golf retailer, we work with a vegan food business as well, and both of those retailers are fantastic at crafting really engaging experiences post-transaction and building a real community where those fans that buy the products are really engaged, they're really excited, they're coming really, really frequently to buy again. And actually, it's not just the profit or maybe loss that they made on that first sale to acquire the customer, but actually the ongoing profit when that customer is coming back weekly or monthly to buy and buy again. So there's a lot of parts to think about when we're setting these targets for customer acquisition.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because you're right. People look at just how much they're generating in terms of sales volume, and particularly online where people can't see the product, right? They can't try it on if it's garments, but even just being able to see a product in real life, and the way it looks online might be very different than when you actually get it. So the level of returns is massive. And you're right, that's absolutely crushing for many, many retailers. And particularly when you are paying per click. So you've now generated a lot of traffic, a lot of sales that are going to come back, but you're not going to ever recoup, right, that cost.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
almost
exactly.
works against you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the other trends, we've just released our trends report, which looks at the state of Google Shopping and how it's changed on an annual basis. And one of the scary, consistent trends we see is a rising cost per click. So as more retailers, and this was really accelerated during the pandemic when a lot of high street and physical stores obviously had to shutter, they had to close, they moved online, they launched on platforms like Shopify and other platforms, and were able to quickly get up online and selling. And then they said, right, now I've got the store, how do I get customers? And naturally, because Google Shopping is such a big channel, it's it's the homepage of Google. As soon as anyone searches, it appears there. People have to scroll past it. masses of retailers got on board and got involved with Google Shopping. But what's happened there is there's still only a finite number of typically 5 or 6 positions or ad positions which show for each search term, for each shopping search you make. So that's just really driving up that auction and making those clicks more and more expensive. And I think that's really challenging at a time when product margins are getting pushed because of what we're seeing with inflations of raw materials, which feed into our products as well. So yeah, I think there's a lot of pressures within the market, particularly being rising competition and also maybe a reduction on product margins as well.
We're going to take a quick break now, and then we'll be right back.
We were hiring when we were making 50 to 100K monthly losses.
And why? Welcome to episode 1.
I can't think of a single founder who's been around for a decent amount of time in business who hasn't had their tunnel of year. This was that year. We're going to be okay, yeah, Sheree. Some are going to hear this and think, you TDP. But hear me out. You only have to do the math to understand that very soon we were $500,000 down.
So as someone who's on the inside like yourself, what would be your best advice to retailers who are looking to use Google Shopping and want to be able as best possible to get the best, I don't want to say, return, or not just the number of clicks, but to be able to maximize that so that they're trying to not get people clicking who potentially won't buy or who are just going to buy and return, and really narrow that down and somehow try to manage the cost side of this so that it becomes more efficient.
Yeah, so I think there's almost two questions in there. So the first one is for retailers who may be new or moving on to Google Shopping, I would actually be kind of hesitant to them. I'd say, is this a channel you really need to use, or is there other channels? Because unfortunately, we see a lot of businesses who haven't had success on Google Shopping, and we choose not to support and grow with them because it's not the right channel for them. So with Google, it has to be demand that exists. So consumers going to Google Shopping looking for brands, looking for products that they know already exist. So if you've got a truly innovative new product, something that no one's ever seen before, there won't be people going to Google to search for it. Likewise, if you're a single direct-to-consumer brand, if you've not got some brand demand already created, you're going to really struggle to for that to come through. And when people do click from generic or awareness terms, they maybe don't know the brand, maybe it's not quite what they were looking for, so that return is quite expensive as well, because you've got to build trust, you've got to do maybe more old school brand marketing, things like influencer marketing on the new side, or maybe PR, and build out your brand reputation and your demand and awareness for your products. And Google Shopping is really servicing that demand. So when people are going to Google looking for you, looking for your products, looking for the awareness related to the products that are on demand, that are being sold, that's when Google Shopping comes in. So we always are quite hesitant to retailers to make sure, is this the right channel for you? If, however, you're selling, maybe commoditized, maybe other, you're a stockist of other brands, you're selling in product categories that are high demand, then absolutely it's going to be a fantastic channel. And then it's about the strategies that are applied to winning that channel, to standing out above your competition. And there, our approach is all about advising around looking at every product uniquely. So there's kind of a theory in Google where you should group all the similar products, but actually we think that every product's unique, that they've got different margins. Some will be about different seasons, some will be for different types of consumers. So we really treat every product SKU uniquely. So that would be our starting point, is that we would say, if you've got a small amount of product inventory, look at how each item is different and think about the right margin and profit you're actually making from that product. Because I'm sure just because you've got 20 pairs of sneakers, they're not all going to have the same margin. They're not all going to have the same price point. They're going to appeal to different types of customers who might be less loyal or might return more products. So, factor in those components if you can, if you've got a small inventory. If you've got a large inventory, if you're in the thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of products, then it's gone beyond what a human can do. And that might be when a technology like ourselves and a team like ourselves can get involved, because kind of to loop back to the beginning of the conversation, this is where machine learning and AI needs to come in, because it's gone beyond what a human can do. We need to leverage the insights and abilities of machine learning to be able to understand those connections between products, which ones are similar, which customers' searches when they're shopping on Google are going to be the most relevant, and the purchase probability or the purchase intent of those search terms and search queries, and then look down the funnel and see how's it resulted in, what's the average order value from that item, what's the margin of that item, and then later on bring in things like return rates as well to be able to give you the profitability. So yeah.
Wow, really exciting. And I think you're right. You really do need something with the power of AI to be able to analyze that much data that quickly and make calls on that. Otherwise, it is really an overwhelming task. And, for the retailer, as you're saying, the cost can very quickly spiral out of control to the point where you're selling a lot, but you're losing money on every sale. It's like the more you sell, the more you lose.
Yes, yeah, and it's sometimes not obvious to see that, because you're looking at it thinking, well, yeah, we're great. We've set a target of, let's say, 10 times return. So for every dollar invested in the channel, getting 10 times back. And this is great. We're hitting that. Then you suddenly realize all the products that have been selling have been discounted products, last season's stock, where you've got 50% off, and suddenly your margin isn't what you thought it was, because it's only been those much lower margin, maybe lost leaders, or much lower profit that have been selling through. So yeah, it really does take that analysis work. And also it's the as I say, we're not replacing the in-house team. We're elevating them to see the data. So there's ways within this channel that you can do bidding, but it's very, very much a black box. So you can't see the insights, you can't see the search terms, you can't leverage easily the performance stats. So that makes it really difficult as someone working at an e-commerce retailer to ask the right questions of this data. Whereas from our perspective, we make that all very transparent, and we bring dashboards and reports, and we elevate the in-house team to think about the strategy. Maybe it makes sense to sell those discounted products, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe you want to take those out and not be advertising those. Maybe it's you're overstocked in certain products and it's nearly the end of that season, so maybe you need to be a bit more aggressive on those products. Maybe there's a new release of an item or a line coming in the coming weeks. So there's so many complexities that come into it, which is where the in-house team know their products, they know their market, they've got insights that just aren't in the data, and they can then be supported by transparency of that data, and then the actions and strategies that are decided by that team can then be implemented through machine learning and automation as well.
Well, it sounds to me like what you're doing at Bidnamic is really critical for anybody who is seriously using Google Shopping and really needs to get a handle on where that budget is going and being able to use it as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah.
And basically, when they work with you, if I'm understanding you correctly, they have a certain target budget, maybe in the same way that most digital advertising is, but you're helping them manage that. You're giving them, as you're saying, that transparency so that they can then, on their side, better control and pull levers in a more, precise way, for lack of a better way to describe it.
Yeah, absolutely. And typically retailers come to us with two challenges. The first one is about growth. So that they've been doing well on Google Shopping, they're getting good results, but they feel like they hit a glass ceiling. They can't get any higher. They can't, they put in spend, they don't really see much more spend being deployed, even if they're giving that budget to their agency or to Google, and just not getting those results. So they feel like they hit a ceiling on growth, and they need to grow faster, or they want to grow faster. The other challenge we hear is around the profitability. So maybe leads on from what we've been talking about, where it looks good initially, but then when they really start to dig down into it, they realize return rates, they realize transaction costs, they realize other related fees, and actually it's break even or maybe even loss making as a channel. So there we would come in and we would take two different areas. One, it's about growth. So we would look, how can we get the products that have that opportunity, maybe have higher margins, maybe have lower return rates, higher lifetime value, which is when customers repeat. Within those products, how can we get those more visibility? and more visibility for the right search terms as well, for those detailed, descriptive, long tail purchase terms, which are going to be driving the majority of revenue. How can we be really aggressive in paying Google for those clicks or those segment of clicks, so we get to the front of that carousel, the Google Shopping carousel, where 60 to 65% of customers are clicking. For those other subset of retailers who come to us with the problem of where it's just not profitable enough for them, or it's just break even or even loss making, we do the reverse. So we look at those and we look at where's the products that maybe are loss making, that maybe they're high value, high margin, but when people click on them, they choose another item. They choose a low margin item. They're bouncing into something else. So we'll look at those. We'll look at search terms that are maybe too generic, that aren't converting to sales, but are costing money. That maybe we're too visible, or the team before that have been too visible on those terms that don't drive revenue, that don't drive profitability. And again, there we'll lower the bids on those, but we'll move that budget that we've saved and we'll try and position it into purchase terms, which are more descriptive, more high converting, driving more revenue. And by doing that, we'll be able to increase their profitability whilst maintaining the revenue that they're achieving. So they're the two challenges we come with, and how we approach them through technology and through strategy as well.
Wow, really interesting. And I think that's got to be a fantastic tool for anybody who is trying to wrestle the online digital marketing beast and come out alive. Where can people find you, Liam?
Yeah, so the best place would be bidnamic.com.
Okay.
Website. You can book through, you can schedule a call with the team who'll jump onto the call, give you some insights. And we really pride ourselves on being very honest. If we don't think that Google Shopping as a channel is going to be right for you, just like earlier, we'll tell them, and we'll say, actually, maybe think about using YouTube or influencers or Amazon, because actually you don't fit the DNA and the view of customers who are really successful on Google Shopping, who are typically multi-brand retailers or in a market where there's already a lot of demand. If, however, a retailer does fit that DNA, we provide a free audit. So we actually get under the hood. We loop in PhD data analysts and data scientists to really give those insights on a very granular level and map out what a strategy could look like for them using the Bidnamic technology. And I'm also personally on LinkedIn as well, Liam Patterson on Bidnamic on LinkedIn.
Well, that's excellent. Well, I'm going to put all of that in the show notes. And I want to really thank you, Liam, for taking the time to join us here on A Seat at the Table. I've learned a tremendous amount. It's really exciting to hear what you're doing. And I think everybody listening, if you are in retail and you are trying to see what to do to drive those online sales, at least check out Bidnamics and see how this could possibly 10x what you're doing. So thanks again for joining us.
It's been a real pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.